Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for tuning today. We're excited to have Jasmine Banks and grateful she's taken some time on a very hot day to join us. And Jasmine, I always like to let people introduce themselves and describe themselves the way they prefer to be described. So the floor is all yours.
Great. Well, part of my presentation is introducing myself, so maybe we should just dive right in. Yeah, everyone's supportive? Great. So, hi, y'all. I'm born and raised in the South, so you're going to get a lot of y'alls, and that's where my little accent comes from, although I hardly ever hear it these days, but people tell me I still have a very Southern drawl. But before we talk about platforms and algorithms, I just wanted to ground us into something deeper, why we tell stories in the first place. For us, for people who care about social change, ecological transformation, and safety and care, storytelling is not just about content, right? It's not about just going viral or sounding good. It's about power. And storytelling, as an African American and Native American person, is how my people have always survived and how most Indigenous people groups across time have survived, right? It's how our grandmamas taught us who we are. It's how we pass down warnings and wisdoms when institutions erased or ignored us. And for progressive movements and progressive people, especially us Black, Brown, queer, Southern-led movements, narrative in particular is a survival tool, and it's about liberation and strategy. So a lot of people confuse. I'm going to set the container for the social media fundamentals that I'm going to walk through, but a lot of folks confuse messaging or what you're saying with narrative, right? So messaging is about what we say in the moment, whereas narrative is about a bigger worldview. A lot of people know that when you're doing social change work, culture, there's a phrase, culture tends to eat policy. But before culture even eats policy, narrative or story shapes culture, which shapes policy, right? And so narrative is the big worldview. It's the why behind the what, and it tells people what we should care about, what's broken, and what a better future looks like for all of us. And here's the thing. If we don't tell our own stories, someone else, usually giant corrupt corporations with mega monopolies, will tell our stories for us. Right. And so, with everything that we do, specifically on new media like social media platforms that we'll be talking about today, it's really important that whatever we push out into the world, that we really think about whose voices are we centering, what systems are we actually naming, and are we just resisting or are we offering some kind of vision rooted in care and radical possibility? On social media, we have a chance to flood timelines with truth. We have a chance to tell stories that are complex around grief and joy, around public banking or ecological transformation, or building people power to democratize more things. And so it really is an opportunity to amplify brilliance that is rooted in community, which we oftentimes feel icky about because social media can be such a cesspool at times. So I'm going to teach you some fundamentals, but not for the purpose of clout chasing or becoming viral, but to build sort of like an online new media collective memory and shift what people believe is possible. That's narrative work, that's movement work. So as we talk about the tech component, I want you to remember that your story, your voice, your truth, these are all sacred things, and we're just using new technologies, algorithms, and this experiment called social media to inform us and inform our movements, but also for the work of transformation. So, any questions before I dive into the meat of all of the presentation? Great. Awesome. I hope I set the container with some clarity. So, today we're going to talk about who we are, the basics, and the use cases for this kind of like fundamental use of the big four of social media. And then I'll save some time for question and answer. So it's nice to meet you. I'm Jasmine. I have been in social change movements for over 10 years as a professional, but most of my life, as I said, I'm African American and Native American. And so I was born and raised in queer Southern traditions and really, really feel a deep commitment to the South, but to all people who are in the freedom struggle. I have been a movement strategist and cultural organizer with a deep track record in narrative development, storytelling, media production, and digital engagement. I should have changed my copy to the first person. I apologize. I've led award-winning campaigns that uplift Black, queer, Southern voices and working class communities. And I tend to use new media and general media as a tactic to expose systems of harm around liberatory futures, right? So I've led a campaign called UnKoch My Campus, where we had a huge narrative and media intervention to slow the impact of Charles and David Koch on climate in our institutions. I have been directing national narrative strategy and producing grassroots media content, like I said, for the majority of my career. So let's dive in. Hold on a second. These multiple screens are not my friend, y'all. As much as I'm a tech savvy person, my little ADHD brain loses track of so much. So what's really wonderful is, when we're thinking about why social media, we have to remember that social media is storytelling at scale. And these platforms and tools, they're tools, they're not strategies. And so we have to be thinking about how do we use them and how do we build strategies that help us build power, and then ultimately establish what our goals are, right? Our goals should be around building community, mobilizing for action, and shifting narratives. And so with social media strategy, you want to be creating specific strategies that quote brand visibility. Now, I know that is not necessarily always a freedom word that we like to use, but the fact of the matter is within neoliberal realities, we all technically, if we're doing work in an organized way, have what folks recognize as a brand. And so we want to be achieving the business, the work that we're doing, whatever those objectives are through targeted social media planning and execution. Then you want to think about content creation, right? You want to be creating engaging, high quality content that resonates with your target audience, which can also be work to figure out. But you also want to be using visuals, videos, written posts to capture attention and increase your engagement. And then finally, in the three pronged strategy of why social media should matter, is it's a form of content management, right? Or community management. You're going to be developing and maintaining active relationships with those target audiences by managing your interactions, responding to folks, and doing what you would do if you were in a networking event, right? In person, which is asking questions, being curious, and engaging with folks in ways that matter online. So, as I said again, social media is storytelling at scale, right? I want to drive home the point that it is a place for telling beautiful, powerful, engaging stories. And then again, driving home the point that these platforms are just tools, they're not strategies. So, just having them is not a strategy. You have to actually create a process to build power with them, and that your core goals should be around building community, mobilizing folks to action, and then shifting narrative for your work. So here's the basics because I want to make sure we all have our 101 agreements. These are the big four right now that most people find have the biggest punch, for your investment. So folks oftentimes don't realize that these four different platforms, Blue Sky is sort of like a Twitter replacement. And because I am who I am and organized against billionaires, I can't fathom putting Twitter on here, but you can use Twitter and Blue Sky as interchangeable here. But Facebook should be used, the vibe there is for community updates, events, and links. Instagram really is a visual first storytelling reels and things of that nature. And then Blue Sky, which is sort of like early Twitter, is very basic text space, but is also for sharing links as well. And then, of course, TikTok is a short form video that really utilizes humor first as its platform algorithm, and then also urgency as its platform algorithm. It's really important to know that as you're determining your audience or what platforms that you should be on for the work you want to advance in the world, that each of these social media technologies and mediums have very specific target audiences. Facebook is not for the youth, as the young people say. All the kids are in other places. And so when you're on Facebook, you need to be thinking about your content, targeting 30 to 65-year-old plus folks who are interested in being mobilized around events, community activities, and then sharing information. It really is kind of become a town square to share a lot of news. Instagram tends to favor its algorithm toward audiences that are 18 to 40 years old. It's culture forward. This is the place where you're going to see popular trends across all sectors of civil society take off. And it's where you're going to get the highest level of social progressive movement visibility or even within the nonprofit industrial complex. With Blue Sky, you're going to get access to a lot of media savvy people. This is where a lot of journalists and reporters and investigators are gathering in lieu of Twitter. And then in TikTok, you're going to get Gen Z, millennials, and then a lot of viral organizing. And I don't just mean cause or social justice organizing. I also mean brands organizing for their ends as well. So, our core principles of engagement, you want to be thinking about how to build relationships, not just reach. And so, I have four pillars here. You want to be consistent, not constant. So, don't give into the pressure to constantly be posting things. Just make sure that when you do post, it's consistent, whether you're only posting on Wednesdays or you're having an end of the week update. That's okay. It doesn't have to be every single day, but what you want to do is allow the algorithms to pick up on when you're consistently providing new content. It will then index it and then push it out to your most engaged followers, which is something a lot of folks don't know about these algorithms. Second pillar is to talk with people, not at them. Oftentimes, people use social media platforms as a broadcast platform. Think of it as like an emergency alert system. You're just out announcing something and walking away. But really, these algorithms are designed to be interactive and collaborative. The more that you're talking with people, asking questions, being curious, using polls, the higher your engagement will be, and you'll have higher visibility. The other pillar in your core principle needs to be centering your voice, visuals, and value. So, figuring out what your voice is for how you want to say things, making sure visuals correspond with that voice, and then make sure their values forward. A lot of people, particularly folks that are 18 to the 40 range, are looking for value forward content to engage with. We know that millennial and younger audiences are leaving churches. Their civil societies are eroding. Um, there's a massive issue with wealth inequality. And so many of these constituencies, these populations, these audiences, they come to social media to connect their identity to something bigger than them. And so it's really an opportunity for you to make sure that you're centering the values to all of the other pieces that you're doing. And then the last principle for your core engagement principles is making sure you're uplifting community stories and voices. Frankly, it's a scary thing to realize, but the new information that is coming across all comms, PR, marketing, and social change studies is showing that the majority of millennial and younger people get their news or get information about their community from social media and no longer traditional media sources or community organizations. And so it's really, really critical to make sure that you're connecting people with the stories and voices that represent their actual lived communities and their actual conditions. So some tips here, like I said a little bit earlier, is make sure that you're using polls and questions inside of your IG stories, your Instagram stories. You want to try as much as you can to have someone who can reply to comments within a 24-hour window because that pulls your engagement up and kind of gives a signal to these tech algorithms that this is a true community that is active and vibrant. And then also make sure you're constantly reposting community from or content from your community members or from partner organizations or for folks who are connected to you in your ecosystem, doing similar work or in the similar struggles that you are in. All right, so let's get some platform deep dives here. So, Facebook is still a power tool for events and groups, period. If you don't have a group on Facebook that is connected to your work, form one now, invite your likes and your followers to join that group. There are platforms like Discord or Slack or Signal that have tried to um, outperform what Facebook groups can do, and they just can't touch it because it's so embedded, it's so entrenched. So it is going to be your power tool for events and groups. You're going to want to use it for community organizing, for event promotion, for long form updates. Really lean into using the groups, using lives, which allow you to come on camera and kind of be your own, NPR or Democracy News Now channel. And then make sure you're always linking your posts. The best practice for Facebook platform deep dive is typically posting between 3 to 5 times a week. You want it to be short, you want it to be skimmable, and then you want to make sure you're using images, you're tagging your organizations and your partners, as well as regular everyday people who follow you. Next up is Instagram, my favorite. If you are on Instagram, please check out Parenting as Political. It is the platform and community that my wife and I built. We currently reach 1.2 million people a month with no paid ads just because of the content that we create. It's sort of like a social justice plus parenting lifestyle site that is also, we produce content in the form of a podcast. But anyway, Instagram is my favorite, and it is visual vibes with purpose. It's for creating your branding, right? Your identity, for building culture, and for deep storytelling. You're going to want to make sure you're using the carousel feature, which means multiple pictures. Usually, you want to have a minimum of three, and then your stories and your reels. The best practice for this is going to be a post 4 to 7 times a week. You're going to want to use the carousels for educational posts and things of that nature, and they have the highest engagement. So just posting on your feed actually doesn't get you what you need when you want to reach people on Instagram. And then, of course, the 30 to 60 second with trending audio is really critical for helping people connect with your work. Next up is Blue Sky. Basically, I like to think of Blue Sky as like where nerds and social media movement folks come together on Blue Sky. It's still very niche. It's for rapid response, it's for community crosstalk, and it's for commentary. If you have a hot take or you have an analysis about why you think the Mamdani democracy socialist win last night was significant, you're going to want to put it on Blue Sky, right? So they call their posts skeets there, quote skeets, and they also use hashtags, which came from early Twitter. Typically, if you post there 1 to 3 times a day actively, you're going to be boosting your voice. It's going to be pushing you out to all of your mutuals, and then folks will be tracking you with hashtag threading. Last up is TikTok, which I don't actively use in my personal life, but support grassroots organizers in building their own TikTok strategies. So TikTok is really supposed to be short, sharp, and silly. That's the kind of the formula for how people utilize it best. It's for viral action, it's for education, it's for cultural critique. You really do not want to do long form videos on this platform if you want reach. You want to do 3 second hooks, you want to have captions, and then you want to have a 15 to 3 minute video at most. All of these platforms, like I said, tools for long form, or excuse me, for long range reach that helps to tell stories about why what you're doing is important for the world. So again, this is meant to be 101, and I hope that folks who may be a bit more skilled do not feel that I'm condescending, but I wanted to condescending to anyone. But I just want to make sure we are very clear about demystifying this, right? It's an art and a science. So, the engagement formula for crafting content across all of these platforms really is as simple as three things. You want to develop a hook, grab attention, whether it's in the writing of your post, in the visual that you create, or in the video that you create. In the first sentence or the first 3 seconds, you should have a hook. Next, you need to have a value, right? You need to share an insight, a story, a call in. And then the last thing you need for your engagement formula is a CTA or a call to action. You want to ask people to do something: comment, share, click, answer something, share a bad knock knock joke. And so, some of the ideas that I've used with my work or helped with other grassroots movement organizations for impact has been like, what's the behind the scenes of organizing work that's happening in your community? What are quick policy wins or policy breakdowns? What does day in the life of democratizing and building or solidarity economy work look like, right? Things like myth busting. We've tackled disinformation in a really powerful way. And then finally, an idea for impact that always has a near and dear place in my heart, which is movement history and connecting intergenerational struggle with pop culture connections. But there's all kinds of creative ways that you can use this three-step formula to create really engaging and wonderful content. So, analytics without the overwhelm. Everyone's like, well, I look on my analytics. What does it actually mean? What is it actually doing? What does it mean, right? Honestly, the things that you should be focusing on across all of these platforms is your reach. How far did it go? Your engagement, how many people interacted with it, and then the saves and shares. The more saves and shares you have, the more your audience, your base is telling you that your content has value to them. Lastly, you want to think about your click-throughs. So if someone clicked on a link, if they signed up for something, that tells you people are ready to take action, and you can organize those people online into offline communities or campaigns or organizations or engagement. And it's really, really important to note that growth is good, but depth and width is better, right? Like our ecosystem teaches us that expansive growth for the purpose of growth doesn't actually get us what we need, and it's actually often really harmful. So you want to go deep with your audience, and you want to go wide with your audience within the context of the work that you're doing. So, how do you sustain your social media strategy? Everyone's like, I can't keep doing this. There's just new stuff to make every single day. And so, my advice to folks that I support in building out their long-term social media strategies is you just have to keep it human, and you have to keep it moving. Do not worry about being perfect. Don't worry about having the perfect graphics or even the perfect brand. Just make sure that you're continuing to grow and adapt. So, you can plan, but stay flexible. I recommend a content calendar. Feel free to repurpose your posts. If you say it one way on Monday, you can say it different next Monday. Don't worry about upcycling things. And then, of course, always make sure that you're sharing your wins, but that you're also asking questions and kind of leaning into things that have tension, and learning together. It really can be a wonderful place to experiment and iterate, um, and grow. So my final tips before we get into the Q&A, and this can be hard for folks, but really social media is designed at its best to be, though it is a digital virtual space, about our humanity, about who we are as people, especially in a time of rising mis and disinformation and AI created content. The more we can bring authentic humanness and all of our messiness and authenticity, the better. So show your face and voice when you can. It's really, really important. like I was saying in the last slide, don't wait for perfect, just post and learn and go, oh, okay, well, that post didn't really take off. Well, what can I do next? And feel free with experimenting. The algorithms see and track when people are testing different kind of content and are adaptive. And then, of course, share your community love and highlights with others. Make sure that you're always figuring out how this is about weaving across space and time whenever internet and social media is at its best. And then finally, think of it as movement media or collective storytelling, not as just your individual account. Understand that you're part of a broader ecosystem that is a part of multiple overlapping echo chambers that are competing with for-profit social media activity, and that people are actually really, really hungry to engage with real folks who care about the work and are in it for the long haul. So with that, because that was my fast and dirty get through it, so I can make sure that I can answer all of your questions, I'm going to open up.
Great.
I don't know, David, how you typically do questions, but I'll
Sure.
toss it back over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for that. So I've got one question before I turn it over to everyone else. I'd love to hear one story of how you took the different things that you just shared and turned it into action. Like I know you had one post that went super viral in 24 hours, or maybe how interrelates with UnKoch My Campus. Whatever story you feel is a good demonstration of what you just described.
Oh, I love Human Value Center. Sorry, I got distracted with folks. So in the early years of mom blogging, there was many of us were on Twitter, many of us had mom blogs, and Instagram was just starting out. It's like I think third or fourth iteration to move into providing a pathway of helping things go viral. And so a core group of three moms and myself decided that decided that the current popular conversation that was happening was at Marianne Williamson, and she had made a comment about how if you deal with postpartum depression or any kind of maternal perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, one of the best things that you can do is just do yoga and meditate. Well, I'm a survivor of, I have multiple beloved women in my life who died as a result of postpartum depression in their early maternal stage. And we understand that, yes, we need to do all kinds of modalities, but to create a viral trend of shaming moms for needing psychiatric meds or support was a problem for our communities. So we created a campaign called Meditate on This, and we organized in small decentralized pods online with our community. We gave them language on how to fact check the quote unquote bad things around pharmaceuticals or psychiatric meds. We talked about reproductive justice, and within 24 hours, we had garnered over 6 million views, and we had pushed Marianne Williamson, who has a huge platform and was in mainstream media, to the bottom of all visibility. And instead, there were thousands and thousands of moms and caregivers and family members talking about how we need better nets of care and collective and communal support for women and birthing people instead of critique and criticism. And so that's an example of how when an online narrative is taking off and it's harmful to our communities, we can counteract that. We can create countervailing stories and narratives that actually, center impacted people and reach new audiences and also help to politicize people. So after that, several nonprofits were created around maternal mental health support. And then a peer-to-peer event was created called Climb Out of the Darkness, where moms who had been suffering from mood and anxiety disorders in the first year postpartum all went out and did a hike at sunrise together. And so it really was a beautiful way. And you can even go and Google now that Climb Out of the Darkness is still a thing, all these years later. So that's one example of how sort of the nonprofit slash social change slash community building work, how we utilize those platforms to reclaim our own stories and drive the narrative.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Beautiful story. Amy, do you want to ask your question, or I could ask for you if you want, or if anyone else has a question, just please let me know. You're happy to go next.
Sure, I can chime in. So my question was, how do you balance doing all this information sharing on social media with other responsibilities that you have? I work for the council offices in Berkeley, representing downtown, Councilman Rudy Pacheco, and social media can often be the last thing that we think of, but it's so important in keeping our constituents informed.
Yeah, well, I think you incorporate it as the marketing plus the communications plus the political education and information piece. You just have to weave it into your strategic vision and look at it as an actual organizing metric. In the same way you would send an email blast to people to let them know about something that's moving, you can repurpose whatever external facing documents to be the piecemealed, broken out content strategy for social media. But it's not really necessarily a balancing act as much as it is an integration act and making sure that you're weaving opportunities to add that content into, content development and curation into the other pieces of how your organization approaches telling the story of the work or telling the story of why it's important.
Thanks. John, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm curious, I guess it's kind of a related question, but you advise creating multiple posts a week, and that could be a lot, but I was just wondering if you had any advice on actually creating the content. Like when you're creating in such high volume, is there a formula that you're following or something like that?
It depends on, and because this is 101, that's sort of like more of a intermediate question, but I'm happy to answer it. It really depends on how you've determined what your brand and your voice is. So, like with parenting is political, people know that my wife or I are going to provide new content when we're able to. Like legitimately, like our whole shtick is like we have 4 kids, y'all. So if you don't hear from us for 3 weeks, it's probably because we're running our kids everywhere. But if your brand or your work is centered around maybe something that has more of a rhythm or is more pressing, you'll want to make sure that you align your content creation to that. As far as um, when you have 3 to 5 posts that you're needing to make during the week, what you want, if you're going to go for the high end, you want to have at least 50% of those posts to be evergreen things that are really low lift for you, whether that's being like, hey, it's a Monday morning news update. Does anyone have any news to share? Or hey, it's Taco Tuesday. And right, just creating things that are normative for you that don't take a lot of deeply curated work. And then at least 1 to 2 posts of those 5 being something that is a little bit more involved and specific to your mission, vision, and the work that you're doing in the world. As far as resources, there are easy resources that you can use, like text art apps that will immediately push whatever variations of the first thing that you create onto your platform. For folks who have a little bit more of a budget, you can use products like Adobe Express, where you put up a quote and then you have Adobe Express automatically give you 3 different versions and 3 different visual expressions of that one quote that you chose. So there are tech ways and there are skill-based ways that you can create visually diverse posts while using the same kind of kernels of content, if that makes sense.
It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions presently? Jorge.
Jasmine, thank you very much for giving this enormous amount of information in such a short time. It's incredible. And congratulations for what you and your wife are doing. My question is, you mentioned algorithms, and as we know, algorithms work more and more in a way that basically the posting goes to the people that think like us, basically, want the same thing we do. So I can see the the value there about building a movement of people, of like-minded people. But in a society that is extremely polarized, like ours in the world, actually probably there's some research showing that uh, social media has part of created that polarization.
Mhm.
How do you think we can do this narrative approach that you explain to talk to people who are not thinking like us, who can think different, and we can establish a more meaningful dialogue that
Yeah.
put us together?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Um, I love that question. I'm a part of the John Powell's UC Berkeley Democracy and Belonging Forum, and we have been troubling that question and addressing polarization and toxic polarization and how we utilize different frameworks across all of our work. So this is something I think quite a lot about. I also share that part of my work over the last couple of years at the height of COVID was tracking how the Koch network were utilizing platforms like Instagram and Facebook and others to spread COVID denialism. It resulted in the force the reopen protests that we saw. Same thing with all kinds of other issues. So totally into this question. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to look at create for yourself a spreadsheet, which are like, here are our like evangelists and true believers or whatever phrase that people want to do. Like the people that really throw down with you and believe your message that you don't actually have to do a lot of convincing. They're going to be, your content is going to be appealing to them because they're already share your beliefs, right? Then you want moderate or outside of those beliefs, and you want to find folks, literally categorize, okay, what kinds of things are they talking about? Like, what are their issues? Follow them on social media and invite them to follow you. So you begin to spread a diverser net for the algorithm to see that it doesn't need to concentrate you further and further to like-minded accounts or influencers, but that you're open to you're open to diverse sets of recommendations. And then finally, you want to look at the people you want to polarize against because some polarization might be what we're interested in. We may not actually want to be flagging community or welcome to white nationalists on our accounts. That may not be our work. So you want to have like your hard line of like, who are the people we do not want to be associated with? You go to those accounts, you create a literal list for yourself. You go to those accounts, you don't follow them, but you click the three little dots on the top right of their account and tell Instagram or tell Facebook, do not show me accounts like this anymore. And so the more you're interactive with how you follow people, how you engage content that you want to see, or content creators that you want to be brought into your ecosystem, the more the algorithm will tailor. The other thing that's really important for this kind of conversation, particularly around Instagram, is the creators of Instagram, the folks who are the highest up in leadership that tailor the algorithm. They're on Instagram telling you what changes they're making to the algorithm. Today, you can go and follow the chief algorithm developer, and he'll say, here's what we're using and experimenting with now. So the advice that I'm giving you now is based on literally things he said 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it could change in 3 or 4 weeks. So making sure you're staying up to date and understand that all of these social media platforms are active and iterative experiments. Um, and then after that, the other thing that you can do beyond tailoring the followers and content creators that you want to call into your network is reaching out to folks that are maybe more on the moderate side or wherever that you want to be targeting and ask them to share your work, right? So think about like if I'm a what do I want to say about myself? If I'm a black anarchist on Instagram sharing content, and I'm like, there's just so many anarchists right now that are commenting, and I would like some democratic socialists or even some classic liberals to follow me. I would reach out to accounts that tailor content for the classic liberal audiences and say, hey, can we cross-pollinate? Can we collaborate? And then that will bring new pipelines, new tributaries to the river of content creators and audience that you've developed.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, yes, Nurul, the
Thank you.
algorithm is a fickle mistress. And oftentimes it changes to suit capital and not everyday people.
Yeah,
However, with collective action in the digital space, we're still able to, as like regular, non-commercial users, to still use it for our benefit for now
yeah.
until they, animal farm us. I don't know.
One of the things that really struck me is that you're sometimes taking what you're doing online and turning it into offline action, like
Yes.
either gathering in person or signing something. And, you've explained, or at least that you do have a background in community organizing as well. So that I think is, the example you gave about the Marion Williamson, where it wasn't just something you did, you gathered a group of people to take action. I'm just curious more, what other sort of, how else have you gotten people to show up in person for an activity or an event or a protest or whatever action you took? Curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, we hold critical consciousness circles where we essentially call parents that are newly understanding that parenting has a political dynamic to it, not political in electoral sense, but political in the power sense, around systems and structures change. We've brought them into online book clubs, and then eventually, after they've attended a couple of our online book clubs, we plan in-person meetups. So it's just like the classic organizer strategy of online to offline and then back again. We have done National Day of Actions that had digital components that then had folks doing things in person and then sharing back what they were doing in person to create online waves of showing activity. So it's just been a really great digital activation and gathering space. Um, I will say, as a longtime organizer, it does not replace genuine community organizing. People clicking a petition that lives on a web page is not the same thing as going and having people assemblies or being in town halls or meeting in person in your front room and building relationships. We need that now more than ever. But we also know that there's a power in being able to divide across spatial geographic limitations. And so this is a useful medium for doing that. Maybe I can come back at another time and do maybe like a 102, 104 level training because there are security considerations, especially for folks that are a part of populations that are often politically targeted. I have been politically targeted by the Trump administration during the first administration. So I don't want to say that there aren't risks involved in what you're doing. But it ultimately it's a cost benefit analysis that
Yeah.
if I'm organizing mutual aid groups in my community, I'm also going to be targeted by opposition. So yeah, we have to weigh those things out for ourselves and create
Yeah.
networks of care and security.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, anyone else have a question they'd like to ask? Appreciate Jasmine coming and sharing all her expertise. Sophie, would you like to come on and ask it, or would you prefer someone else read it out?
I can ask. Thanks so much. This is like trying to get some food in here too. Jasmine, thank you so much.
Awesome. I love Movement Strategy Center. Look at all these great folks in here.
Oh, cool. Right on. Thank you so much. I came in late, so I hope we get the deck, but what I did here was just like so fruitful to hear. Thank you so much. My question was on this. My initial question was around security, and you kind of responded to that, and that's great. And then I have another one. We have a body of work around artists organizing in the Bay, and really have like a collaborative model of leadership, and we'll continue to be expanding that network. And so I'm just curious if you have any insight on, it's great to have somebody dedicated. I think we're trying to secure funds so that we can have somebody who this is like a part of, their focused work. And um, we would love to have it be open, and accessible to other folks. So I'm just curious if you had any insights around kind of the infrastructure to support that in a healthy way.
Yeah, so there, depending on how you set some of your accounts, I mean, obviously, folks understand on Facebook, if you have an organization page or you have an influencer page, you can have admin to that. This it's similar on Instagram. You can invite people to be content contributors. So you never want to obviously give anyone who's outside of your or unbound from the accountability of your organization full admin access. Like that's just security 101. But the feature now on Instagram that allows you to invite collaborators means that both the artist's Instagram page and your Instagram page will be co-owners of the intellectual material that is being created. So that's a really beautiful way of doing it. I know within progressive philanthropy and movement, folks are beginning to take social media out of the comms department as just some kind of like amplification or broadcasting tool and reframe it. And this is what I said at the start of the call as a narrative and storytelling tool, which we all know is the most critical piece of organizing, right? Like people will not take action or build power for ideas or new solutions that are not a part of their story of self or their story of meaning making for the world. And so artists play a role in that, visual artists, illustrators, especially those who can translate their medium into the digital space. So I think that's kind of the angle that you take, but you're definitely going to want to develop a protocol where you have multiple people who have passwords. The passwords get changed, like making sure you have the clear infrastructure, standard operating procedures for your account, and treating it like you would anything else that's critical, right? Whether it's curriculum development, whether it's program strategy, look at managing new media, emerging media, in that same lens. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about that is oftentimes, some of our folks in our generation and in different spaces that have been entrenched in some of the organizing strategies of the 90s and early aughts want to poo-poo social media and like, oh, okay, Instagram, what's that really changing? Right now, we're showing how Zohran Mamdani used new media and emerging media trends to really drive the narrative and undermine the democratic establishment in a way that is really unique. And this trend is only going to be growing as millennial and younger people are looking at podcasters and micro influencers who connect with them and tell stories and call them to action on these platforms. So, the best kind of organizers meet the people where they're at, and most of them are on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
Thank you so much.
I
You're welcome.
think we've got time for Jonathan. You want a question? Good to see you
Yeah,
too.
yeah, good.
Okay, native roots.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. I think listening to it, I've been really realizing how much maybe consciously, subconsciously I've been pulling back. I think I saw Nurul, I'm gonna pronounce your name wrong, Nurul's comment too, right? About we haven't made like a conscious choice not to use anything except X, like we're not using X, but
Mhm.
this whole contradiction of, how do we corrupt this this power grab as we're being, our time and our community that we're reaching out to's time then gets commodified by these, the tech lords, right? So as we're
Mhm.
trying to do the revolution, every time we're on this, we're funding our oppression. And I'm just trying to, really grapple with the ways that we um
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, how do we manage this contradiction so that we're not giving them more than what we're getting out of it, I guess is the question. So I just love to hear you riff on that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. Obviously, I named X. And, with the work that we do with UnKoch My Campus, we demand universities divest from Koch funds in their university and reject Koch funding. And then those same universities take money from Gates and Bezos and all the other people, right? So it's like, how do you pick and choose? I think you have to know what your ideological principles, ethics, and hard boundaries are. You also have to understand, like, what is your end goal? And determining for yourself, your organization, your collective, who you are accountable to. Do the means justify, like, are they going to justify toward the end of what you're trying to organize for? My work means that I'm looking for parents who are somewhat politically activated, but need deeper consciousness development, need a community to take collective action, even if it's in the digital space, and a political home. And so I know the majority of those community members are going to be online, right? They're going to be on these places. I remember an elder telling me, I would be like, I just really can't handle the misogyny that I experience when I have to organize with X amount of group. And she would say to me, then Jasmine, that's not your work. And the beauty of movements is someone else, it is their work. So we all have to decide. We all have to decide. And then not to use, a neoliberal frame or market-based logic, but it really is a cost benefit analysis. If it's going to cost you credibility with your community and the movement folks, if it's going to compromise like your overall vision and the work that you're going to do, and it's a net negative, then you have to make those really hard decisions to not organize in those spaces. Then, if you do choose to organize in those spaces, there's an acceptance that you have to make, right? That a lot of these tech oligarchs already have our data, they've already captured us, and that there is no ethical consumption or participation inside of late stage capitalism, right? And so I can also try and just do print media only. And I can throw away social media. And now I'm just like, okay, well, who owns the newspapers though? And whatever, right? So we're just negotiating these kind of harms. Um, yeah, it's a hard question, and I know some people for their own individual well-being are not made for that kind of work and in that kind of space. And I send them my solidarity. I state in principle struggle with them, and yeah, but there are some of us who are in the trenches on Reddit countering disinformation and in the QAnon cesspool still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's funny the way too we can, in a way, still got to go to the gas pump and put gas in my thing so I can go to the meeting, right? But then all of a sudden I have this other response to posting something. So there's all these internal
Yeah. Yeah. No, no.
as we're trying to navigate this terrain. It's a real interesting time.
Yeah. And for me, it's a what and this is one of the things that I love with my 9 to 5 job. I work for an organization called Liberation in a Generation on top of all the other movement work, but they have this paper and this stance, a worldview called radical pragmatism, that we understand that this is not the best of all possible worlds. It is not pragmatic for me to be like, I need to reach 1 million people in the next 4 months and be like, oh, but I'm not going to use any of these tools that they're on. And so there are concessions that are made, but while we're building those alternative systems, while we're throwing, sand in the gears of these tech oligarchs and undermining them, are there insurgent ways we can still use some of the tools that they have created and that we created? A lot of people don't understand. We were the experiment that created these platforms. How can we use them for the things that we need right now in the middle term as a bridge to the new platforms and things that we'll be doing in the future?
Wow. You're very good at explaining these things, and I can see why a lot of people tune into your podcast and everything else you're doing. Scott, do you want to quickly ask your question, and then we'll let Jasmine get out of here on time so she can do whatever she needs to with the kids?
Sure. The question is, where does Substack and the blogosphere fit within your social media strategy?
Yeah, so I don't consider them social media first. I consider them as publishing platforms first. And so that they are adapting and changing, but I think they are the gathering place for all of your ideas. And you want to be capturing longer form ideas and community engagement in Substack, in Medium, in the blogosphere. Like I said, I was an early mommy blogger. I was an advisor to one of the largest women's mom blog, women influencers companies that has ever been established in the United States. And so I see that resurgence coming back. But social media like folks don't go to find people's substacks to engage in the same kind of bite-sized engagement that we get with TikTok, with Blue Sky, with Instagram. But I think that it is a part of a multimedia approach that would really help to build out folks' engagement and create long-term relationships. I have another presentation where we talk about that. I also am a big fan of people figuring out how to get off of the content creator pay for play platforms like Substack or Patreon and building your own website and monetizing it individually or with groups that you can collaborate with. A group that has done this really well is Democracy at Work. They have multiple creators that have written mediums, that have podcasts, that have YouTube videos, and they kind of create this beautiful clearinghouse of folks who are sharing in the content creation process. But it actually is not as hard as people think to create your own platform, monetize it, and not have to go through a lot of the same data traps that Substack and Medium and other platforms also have in the same way that Facebook and Instagram do.
Right. Well, thank you again. Is there any last thoughts or place you want people to follow you or join or do something? But anything you'd like to add at the end, feel free.
Yeah, you can check out our work. My wife and I's work around community organizing and cultural organizing. Parenting is Political on Instagram, and we have a podcast by the same name that's across all podcast platforms. And then if you want to follow my work around defending public education and ceding power for regular everyday people, Generation Common Good. And then if you want to check out my economic and narrative work, check out Liberation in a Generation.
It's awesome. Well, hopefully everybody who's got their camera on will do something visual to appreciate Jasmine, and those who are off camera, maybe a little vocal thank you, be awesome. But so appreciate the breadth of knowledge and just the amount of work that you've done to try and help change society. It means a lot, especially as the other forces seem to be so strong and power. Just knowing that you're doing all this stuff out there and so good at it is comforting. So please keep it up.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna stop